welcome to Spooky Southcoast. Tim Weisberg here, along with co-host Stephanie Burke, science advisor Matt Moniz, and the silent assassin Matt Costa. We are here to talk about paranormal topics, as we are each and every Saturday night. And, of course, this being Psychic September, we couldn't finish off with a bigger bang than to have our guest tonight, James Van Praagh, who will be joining us in just a second. Just want to let everybody know, if you're new to the program or if you've been around with us, we've been on the air for almost 10 years now, so if you've been with us over that time, you've seen the changes in what we do on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. It's our live video feed of everything going on in the studio, so while we're talking with James, if you'd like to see what's happening here in the Spooky Studio, you can just go to Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. And there we also have a chat box, which we've gone through a couple incarnations now over the last few weeks of the chat software. Well, what happened was, as we've been doing Psychic September, the people hitting the website has gotten to be so much that it's been crashing the website. So we had to make a few changes, and one of those changes is we've altered the chat. So now you can actually chat with us via Twitter. You can either use it right in that box on the Spooky TV page, or you can just tweet from your regular Twitter app or your whatever you may use for Twitter using the hashtag SpookyLive. So you'll see anything with Spooky Live will be in relation to what's going on to the show while it is on the air, and it's a way for you to interact with us. If you have any questions, any thoughts, you just want to share what you think about what we're discussing on the program, hashtag Spooky Live is the way to do that. And you can see everything right there on Spooky TV at SpookySouthcoast.com. And if you miss the show at any time, we always put the video archives up, and we also have the iTunes and wherever else you can get podcasts, we have the audio version available as well. Plenty of free shows from over the years for you to check out and listen to, including the other shows of Psychic September. Of course, we had Bob Olson on a few weeks ago. We had Matt Frazier on last week. But man, am I excited for the guests that we have tonight. And Stephanie, I know you are as well, because
I'm super excited.
This is actually one of your idols.
It is.
And we actually have joining us now on the line James Van Praagh. He's considered a spiritual pioneer, one of the world's most celebrated and respected spiritual teachers working today. He's brought a mindful awareness to the subject of communication with the dead into the public psyche. For the past 30 years, Mr. Van Praagh is known as a survival evidence medium, meaning that he provides evidential proof of life after death via detailed messages from the spiritual realms. And of course, you've seen him on numerous television programs, numerous radio programs, and now we are so honored to welcome him to Spooky South Coast. Good evening, James. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Tim and Stephanie. Thank you for having me. Nice to be with you on Spooky TV.
And
Spooky South Coast.
we like I said, we've been doing the Psychic September, where we've been trying to give people a better idea of people that have psychic and spiritual abilities. And I think there's a lot of misconception out there from the general public, and a lot of misconception from the audience that we normally talk to, the paranormal field, where I don't think people really understand the gifts that you have.
Tim, I couldn't agree with you more, and I was just talking today to a fellow medium, Maureen Hancock, who about the exact same subject, because I think, unfortunately, the people that I listen, and I'm guilty of this as well. The entertainment aspect, television aspect out there, the people that are producing shows of the paranormal, I think that, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of them are not educated about the differences or really what this world is about. And I think that it's more than just things that go bump in the night. I think that, unfortunately, as portrayed on television, just like you got Ghost Whisperer with people, there's the entertainment factor, so you got to weigh that in. At the end of every single Ghost Whisperer, I made sure that she she brought the spirits to the light, and that was the way we left it, because I wanted to make sure it was on a positive, loving note, which should always be. But things like, and I love Teresa Caputo, Long Island Medium, of course, it's huge. I think it's great that program is getting out. Your program is getting out. I think it's fantastic. The only thing is, I think that we have to be very, very careful how things are demonstrated and shown. For instance, and I don't even think Teresa Caputo is aware of it, but as she comes out and she's able to just walk into a bakery and start connecting with spirit, or walking to a limousine and connecting with spirit, yes, that can happen, but I really think that people should be aware that it's not something that a spirit just shows up and there you're always open, you're always on. And people come up to me and they say, "What do you see?" And I said, "It's not like that. It's a process. It is really a process." And as a medium, you have to really sit for many, many years to develop the ability to be, if you will, a speaker for the spirit world. And it's very, very different. Now, everybody is psychic from one degree or another. Everybody is intuitive. We all know intuition is the soul's language. Language of the soul. Intuition means into the soul. So we're all born with a sixth sense. And some people are more highly sensitive than other people and so forth. And that ability can be indeed developed. But not everybody is mediumistic. So now every medium should definitely has to be psychic from one degree or another. They have to be a pretty good psychic in order to be a medium. Because as a medium, you need a very strong foundation of intuition, of psychic ability. Okay. And then you go from there to a higher level of frequency where you really are, if you will, interacting between the higher frequencies of the other realms, of the other dimensions, if you will, and to the lower ones of the earth. And it's a very different energy you're using than psychic work. So I've seen a lot of psychics or people out there, mediums. It's very interesting. The phrase that a lot of people know about, and I know that they haven't been working very long because this phrase has only been around since John Edward came out, Crossing Over. I think he coined it, was psychic medium. And I have a little problem with that. That might be my own thing because I hope every medium is psychic, because otherwise I wouldn't want to be around that. But, you have to be there. So when I've seen mediums work, and they're not fully aware of the ability or the gift, they tend to snatch things from the air on a psychic level. So they're using their psychic ability, and it's really just a matter of psychism, if I can say that, psychism. And it's not really a full content message of beginning, middle, and end of the spirit. It's just snatching little bits of information, and that's not full mediumship. So mediumship is when you fully blend with the spirit, and you're able to bring through, if you will, the personality traits, details about their life or their death or passing. And through that, of course, the spirit will observe you and tell you things that have been going on with your life. That's through the mediumistic part of you, not the psychic part of you. So it's a little bit of a difference. I hope that makes a little bit of sense.
No, absolutely. So what you're saying, if I'm following correctly, what you're saying is that somebody would have psychic abilities and psychic tendencies, and so they might be giving a reading, but they could be picking up on these things psychically from the living as opposed to connecting spiritually with someone who has moved on.
100% correct. 100% correct. And not any fault of the person per se. I think it's just they haven't been trained. They really haven't studied. Maybe they're ignorant about it. I think as a medium, you really have to develop for many, many years. I really equate it to going to medical school and sitting really in the silence for many years to develop this sensitivity, to develop the nuances, the connection with the spirit, the connection with your own spirit, if you will. Because it really is, it's spirit-to-spirit communication. The spirit world, they're connecting with your spirit. So I believe that the spirit, or the soul, we can call it the soul, is really the mind. Part of the mind is the soul. And so it's a mind-to-mind communication. The mind of the spirit that is incarnate is sending a thought, a feeling, an energy to the medium's mind. So it's mind-to-mind. And the medium is the one that gives it out then with the receiving. So it's very, very different than psychic. Because psychic is... really, if you will, it's a solar plexus, that's a power center there. Go with your gut, and you get a first feeling of something. You get a gut feeling, an intuition. You know something. That's a very different feeling than mediumship.
Well, the idea of having either gift is something that I'm fascinated with, of the process, of how it works. And usually that's one of the questions that I ask anybody that has such abilities that we have on the program is, how does the process work for you? How does it happen for you when you're making one of those connections?
Perfect. That's a great, great question, Tim. And I'll explain this to your listeners, too, in different ways, because you have to remember that every single practitioner is different. So, and their background is different, their life experience is different, their training is different. So everyone approaches it in a different way. My background, my experience of how to do this, what I do, the process of mediumship for me is, and I train people to do it this way as well, I will have them really create a space. And I have them first, of course, attune themselves to their own spirit, their own, if you will, their own heart, where the seat of the soul is right behind the heart. So I have them first become very, very aware of their own energy, of their own heart space, of their own connection of self to, if you will, the universe, the infinite, the oneness. And then I'm very, very, I would just say then become very, very aware of the space around me, the atmosphere around me, from the top of my head to the left side, the right side, in front of me, behind me. And I become very, very aware that I shift my mind, I shift the awareness, and I become very aware of shifting that awareness, and it's almost like a neutral space. Like you put yourself into, it's a passive activism. It's the only best way to describe it, a passive activism. And so you're stepping back kind of with your awareness, and your consciousness, and you're letting spirit slip in. And you invite them with your thoughts, because thoughts are things. So you invite them to come closer to you and blend with you. And then you receive, and then what I do is I receive, if you will, the subtle whispers, subtle messages. I'll first pick up the personality of the individual. I'll pick up if they were funny, if they were very serious, if they were outgoing, if they were introvert. And I'll pick up things about them, sometimes their physical appearance, sometimes how they passed over, sometimes a date, sometimes where they passed away, the death conditions, and so forth. And then I make sure that with that information, I give that out to, if you will, the audience member or the person that's sitting for a reading, and that's how my connection is made. That's a process of how I work one way. Okay, that's one way. Another way, if I wanted to do a psychic reading for somebody, is I attune myself to their heart, from my heart to their heart, and I do what's called an empathetic link, which means having empathy. So in your heart space, you envision a beautiful green light going to the other person's heart. And I really believe that we're all connected. I believe that we're just this oneness. And I think that everybody can read another person's energy. So you're just shifting the awareness to what you feel in that person's heart, and then you begin. That's where your starting point is. And from there, you start picking things up on a psychic or intuitive level about the person's past, about who they are right now, what's going on in their lives right now, and what does the future look like at this particular moment. Because remember, we all have free will, and we're always able to change our experience with our free will. Does that make sense?
Oh, it definitely does. You mentioned a green light when connecting empathically. Is there a reason why it's a green light? Is that, does the green have a significance?
Sure. The green light is really associated with the chakra, the heart chakra. Green is actually color. It's the vibration. It's a frequency that is located in the heart. That's the green of the heart chakra. So that's the vibration that you're attuning yourself to. That's why I use green.
Okay, that makes sense. And when you are making these connections with people, as you said, Teresa Caputo, she can walk down the street and have, all these connections happen. But it sounds like for you, it's really kind of, not to use an overused sports term, but getting in the zone and being able to put yourself out there. Is there a difference then in the strength of the connection and in the...
I think so.
And the effect it has on you as well.
I met Teresa Caputo 2 weeks ago, and I love her. She's fabulous, and she's great. And I had a great time with her. We closed a restaurant together, and she's a really sweet,
awesome.
lovely, lovely lady. I don't know how much she's been around as far as mediumship goes and understanding a lot of the mediumship. I think it's a bit of just a pure ability that she has, and I'd love it to see it honed in even further. But with me, what I do is, the way I process things, I have to definitely get yourself in the zone. Put yourself in the right mindset. So if I know that I'm doing a demonstration that night in front of 100 to 2,000 people, whatever it might be, or 20 people, whatever it is, during the day I'll have a certain mindset. And I'll make sure that my mindset is very open, because, this is very interesting, because the spirit world will use you that day, and they will give you signs, they will give you symbols, they will be around you, ready to use you that evening or that time when you're going to be working. So, for instance, I was doing a demonstration one night, and I was driving on the freeway in Los Angeles, and there was a red, white, and blue balloon in the middle of the freeway, and actually hit my car. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, I'm going to be using that. Obviously, that's a sign, mm-hmm. So we'll see where that belongs in the demonstration. And it was the very last reading. It was a message from a lady, from her son, who passed away. And he was talking about being in the coffin and the type of suit he had on, the pin that she put on his lapel. And at the very end, I remembered, because he gave me that thought in my mind. I said, did you perchance have a white, red, and blue balloon that you gave out after he passed? She said, yes, as an honor to him. So you see, you have to keep yourself kind of open. There's got to be kind of a mindset. And for me, I'm just really the vehicle of the spirit world. I'm really not working for the living, sorry. I'm not working for the living people. I'm actually working for the spirit people. I'm actually the voice of the spirit world, or an ambassador, if you will, to that world, because just to tell you, when people pass out of the physical dimension, a three-dimensional world, one of the first things that happens is we have a life review, where you look back at your entire life and you see all the good things you did, the bad things you did, where you used compassion and forgiveness, where you didn't have patience, where you said things you might not be proud of. So you go through your soul lessons that you signed up for, if you will, before the incarnation, and you see if you pass the test or you didn't pass the test. And it is a sense, let's say there's a father who passes over and he was never able to tell his daughter he loved her. And it really bothers him in the spirit world that he didn't tell his daughter he loves her. And because he didn't do that, perhaps, maybe she never knew love in her life. She never knew how to ask for love. She never had a relationship with someone because she didn't know about love, so forth and so on. So the father, who's very upset about this, may, in his mind, want to come back and give her that one last time to say, I'm sorry, I love you. And he might go around the human world looking for just the right medium and just the right opportunity to come through and be able to come through, practice enough to coming through, sending a thought, concentrating the mind thought to the mind of the medium, how to do it, how to communicate, because it's not very easy. It's not an easy process. And you might practice for a long time before that exact moment happens when the daughter's in an audience or with a one-on-one with the exact medium and is able to come through and give her that message. So isn't that interesting how much it really does work with the spirit world? And this is, again, my experience. This is based upon 30 years of me working as a medium, and that's how I do it. I don't know if other mediums do that. I know there are some that do in the UK who have helped to teach me, but that's, to me, I'm just a servant, if you will.
Well, and of course, my co-host Stephanie is also a medium, and she's always researching how people make those connections and researching how people work. When you get together with other mediums, is that something that you talk about? Do you talk shop, or do you just kind of enjoy each other as people?
Everybody's a personality. So, as you can tell, I don't know if you can tell, but I have a very outgoing personality. I have a pretty funny sense of humor. I'm originally from New York, so I'm a little cynical and funny, and that's why Teresa Caputo and I got along very, very well, because we kept on screaming, oh, my God. It's funny. She's really the only one I've seen recent. Well, that's not true, but the most recent I've seen is her, and we just couldn't get enough of sharing, because there really isn't it. It's interesting because there aren't many opportunities, believe it or not, at least in the United States, for mediums to get together and speak about things, especially two mediums who've had public profile, been on television shows and so forth. It's a whole different speak than it would be somebody who's just, been a medium for a year or two or something. So the experience is very interesting, and because you don't really get to talk about it, you've got to keep it to yourself and your family. So we had a really nice talk, Teresa and I, about the world that we do this work in, and the world of mediumship. And is it interesting how many people walk their talk who don't walk their talk, and Hollywood and mediumship and so forth. It's so interesting to be talking to somebody who's had that experience. So yeah, other mediums. I would say the UK mediums. I work a lot with the United Kingdom, English mediums, and I do classes over there in Scotland and Ireland and England. And I've worked a lot with some very well-known and established mediums who've been working for 30, 40, 50 years. So with them, it's a whole different thing than it is in the U.S. The U.S. mediumship is so different than in the UK. And I just got to say, son of caution, that people in the United States, they really have to put the time in. They've got to put the effort in, and they've got to know why they're doing the work. And the work has got to be to bring service and healing and to raise the consciousness.
Well, we had Bob Olson on a few weeks ago, and I know that he's a friend of yours. You've worked very closely with him in the past, and he mentioned to us on the program that he doesn't feel like there's anybody out there that is intentionally working as a fraudulent medium, that nobody's really out to con anybody. It's just some people might have a little bit more faith in their abilities than they should. Some people are putting more stock in the messages they're getting than they should. Has that been your experience over the years, too, that it's just a matter of experience?
Tim, 110%. And Bob, I got to tell you, it's really a funny story with Bob Olson. And those who don't know Bob Olson, they have to know Bob Olson. He's fantastic. He was a detective years ago, so he's very down to earth, very skeptical. And he does have this Afterlife TV website and all about psychics and mediums who are legitimate. But you have to really be tested to get on that site. And this is a funny story. So I really met Bob, 10 years ago, or maybe 5 years ago, or 6 years ago. And I said to him on the phone, I said, Bob, can you put me on your website? I mean, I'm not there, and I'm just wondering. And he said, I haven't seen you work in person yet. So I said, okay, Bob. And I respected that. I really, really respected that. So I did a demonstration in Massachusetts and invited him and his wife. And they came to see me, and it was a really incredible evening. And it's wonderful. One of the readings, the contacts I made was a little girl who came through to her mother and talked about the dress she was wearing and the prayers that were said at the funeral and so forth and so on. Really great evidential mediumship, okay? Great evidential mediumship. There's no way anyone could deny it, down to her shoes they put on her and all this stuff. And he came back to the backstage afterwards, and I looked at him and said, did I pass the test? And he goes, oh yeah, which I love that. I love that, he's got to test people. That's very sincere because, again, I think that people have a good heart. I think the intentions are probably very good. They really want to help people. But I think in our society right now, there's all this quick fix, and even social media. I mean, I heard you at the beginning of the show talking about Twitter and this, and I'm like, oh my God, it's so over my head. I'm so old with technology. But we are so quick, we're so fast in society right now that we really don't have time to slow down and process and really process the mediumship, you know. And it takes years to develop it, I think. And then I think the intention is a little bit strange for some people, you know, because I teach mediumship, of course, and I often ask people, the first thing I ask them is, why are they doing it? Why are they being a medium? And some people say, well, I want to heal, or I want to help others, or, you know, I want to make people feel better. And I say, well, that's great. Why don't you be a doctor or a nurse or a massage therapist or, you know, or a grief counselor? Why would you do mediumship? What is that? Why is that? So it's tough because I think there's got to be a natural ability. There's got to be a sense of a humbleness, humility with the whole thing. I think that you have to realize that the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. And I think that there are some mediums that get out there, and this is true, I've seen it in some psychic people or whatever, they'll take a class of mine, and they'll do really well in the class. And next thing I know, they're out in the public trying to do readings for people. I'm like, oh, my God, that's dangerous. It's so dangerous. So I don't think they mean to. I think it's just ignorance. I really think it's just ignorance. And I have to say it because I got to speak my truth. I always have.
Well, I mean, you work in television as well. You've been behind the scenes on shows like Ghost Whisperer, and so you know that a lot of the entertainment industry now, it's kind of what they call the MTV effect, where everything's quick edits, quick cuts. You know, there's not really time to develop story in television in general, and I think it's kind of like that in society, where, you know, we don't put in the time to let things develop. We live in kind of an ADD society, and I think a lot of mediums are trying to read the same way.
I agree, and they're doing a disservice. They're doing a disservice to the living and a disservice to the spirit. And I'm going to tell you something. When they do a disservice to the living, can you imagine them going through information and it's not right, and they're going through all the stuff and not making it up, but not being accurate about that. It's amazing when they pass over, they're going to see all the people that they harmed, all the people whose name they took in vain will be standing there to greet them and saying, what did you do that for? You didn't hear me correctly. Why'd you take the time to really focus on that thought? Why'd you go right ahead? So it's an interesting thing. I just think, I think everything's so fast. And if they're going to do work like that and not have processed correctly and not integrate it correctly, then they should have no business doing it. I really mean that. I mean, they really don't. Even me, I still have to be in the development circle. I'm still developing, you know. You have to do that all the time because things change all the time. Your life experiences change, your life references change. And I just think every medium should have that sense of always wanting to learn, always taking classes, always doing that. And, and building up the confidence, of course.
Well, we are taking questions via Twitter. If you'd like to ask us a question, you can tweet us at SpookySC or use the hashtag SpookyLive, which, of course, you can follow along with at SpookyTV at SpookySouthcoast.com. But one of the questions that's in there, Paula wants to know, for one of these mediums that are just getting started and some of the people that you're teaching in your courses, how will they know when they've made a true connection and they're not just imagining it or wanting it to happen, that it's actually a true legitimate connection?
That's a very, very good question. Excellent question. And that goes to working with the information that you get. So it works with, for instance, when you first come to a work, I know from my experience, and I just finished a class in Tucson, you can really get, when people first come to a class, I mean, whether they're inexperienced, completely brand new, or really they've worked for a little bit, it seems that people tend to get caught up in the head. Am I going to get this right? Oh, my God, what's going to happen? They're used to judging it. And it becomes more about them than about the message. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So with a true development, you need to really blend your mind, and you really need to what's called surrender. You need to surrender so much of your mind so the spirit comes in so close to you that you actually feel them, you feel the personality, you feel the characteristics, the personality traits, and that you have to open yourself up that much to fully bring through that. And when you do that correctly, there'll be a certain, if you will, nuance, a very subtle feeling. And then you become very aware of the spirit, and you tell the person that you're working with, I have a man here, he's 58 years old when he passes away, he feels like he dies of heart failure, his name is Alfred or Albert, or I get an AL, same with him. And you really want to develop your information, and you'll get it inside you. You'll know it in your pit of your being, that information, because you become the spirit, and the spirit becomes you. You kind of become one.
Sorry, Matt, you have a question?
Yeah. Have you ever come across where a spirit decides it wants to lash out? In other words, they want a negative message being brought out to somebody.
Matt, are you wearing black? Are you wearing a black shirt or something, or black
No,
pants or black? No?
no.
Okay. Okay.
Charcoal gray.
Charcoal gray. Okay, I know dark. I'm sorry. So do I ever get the spirits that lash out? Very good question. And my experience has been this. I'm more afraid of the living than I am of the dead. I really am. More afraid of the living because you're not sure what you're going to get. But with the dead, I kind of know. So I'm going to throw something back at you guys. And this is, of course, I think this is great to talk like this and interact, and it's how we learn and grow and expand. I think that we have to realize that every single human being is God. Every single person is that loving being. We come from a source of love. I think that we got to be very, very careful that we don't get caught up in the mind giving out tricks, or the mind playing games, the mind creating things that are not there based on fear. So I personally believe there is no evil. I don't believe that at all. I think that that's man's concept of that. Man is a conception of that. And I think whether it's a religious background or belief systems or whatever, I think it comes from fear-based, if you will, fear-based thoughts. I think that, and you can create more and more of that if you want, because you are God, you can create anything. Are there those souls that are unevolved? Sure, I think there are. I think on this earth world, this three-dimensional world, it's a schoolroom where you have souls of very unevolved beings and souls that are very evolved beings. So there are some souls that are, let's say, going through nursery school, and there are others that are doing postgraduate work. If one thinks that war and hate and destruction is the way, they're not evolved. If they come from a space of unconditional love, forgiveness, compassion, then they're more evolved. The sense of the law of the universe of energy, what you give out to receive back. If you're going to put your mind on a level of lower level of fear and evil and all that stuff, like will attract like. So evil will attract those lower entities, those lower beings, if you will. But I think at the core of everyone, we are indeed God, we're indeed love. So it's really interesting. It's like a radio station. You were on the radio. So are you going to put your dial to 89.5 or 106.7? and we have the choice to do that.
So
Does that make sense?
by you being at that higher frequency, that more evolved connection, spirits that would have that type of an approach, if they are still learning and they are at that lower level, you wouldn't really be connecting with them necessarily because you're already dealing with those that have already evolved.
It's a great insight. The answer is yes and no.
Okay.
and I'll explain that. And it's a really good insight because like attracts like. So, no, those lower, and that's what people say, do I need protection? Well, protecting from yourself. But if you surround yourself with pure love, energy, you bet you're fine. But just think of it. Thoughts are things. So when I say I'm more afraid of the living than the dead, just think about it. Living people around us, send out thoughts to us all the time, right? Send out thoughts all the time. And thoughts are things. Thought is energy. So where does a thought go? A thought is a bullet. It goes right to its target. So if someone's thinking of you, whether goodwill or not, that energy is going to go right into your space, which we call the auric field, the electromagnetic field around you. And people will walk around without realizing that they're carrying around with them someone else's thoughts. And they could be good thoughts and bad thoughts. They might be carrying around thoughts. So I tell people, when I work with them, okay, so as a human being, did you take a shower today or a bath? And they'll say, yeah. And I say, why? Because I physically want to be clean. What about spirit? What about your spirit atmosphere? What about the thoughts that other people have from you? I once did a reading for a lady probably about 20 years ago, private reading. She came to my apartment, and I opened the door, and her whole auric field was shot. It looked like Pigpen from Charlie Brown. There were holes and leaks in the auric field, the energetic field around her, and it was really dark colors and browns and grays and all that stuff. I'm like, oh, my God, what is this? And she comes into the house, like, please come into the apartment, have a seat. I'm thinking, okay. And she starts crying her eyes out. She says, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? I'm so depressed. I can't sleep at night. I worry all the time. I have such bad feelings. What's wrong with me? And I told her, it's not what's wrong with you. It's who's wrong with you. Whose energy are you carrying around with you, making their energy your energy? So what I did was I started to, if you will, alleviate, pull away thought forms that were around her, energies that didn't belong to her, whether they were her kids or her neighbors or whoever it was, and I just grounded the energy. I grounded it using Mother Earth. And I didn't tell her what I was doing either. And within 10 minutes, this lady said, oh, my goodness, are you doing something? I feel like my old self again. So it's a sense of being mindful about our energy field. And it's really very important that, for instance, in the morning when I wake up and I take a shower and I cleanse myself, I will then stay and I will visualize, if you will, a beautiful golden light, a God light, or put my mindset in the God-loving energy, and I bring it down to my chakras, to the crown chakra, all the way through the body, and I just imagine illuminating every cell, every muscle, every organ with that God light. I imagine all around me, and any energies that are stuck on me that don't belong to me, any psychic debris from other people, other thought forms, I just visualize that going down the drain through my, out of my fingers and toes, down the drain. And if people do that, they'll begin, on a regular basis, like every day, they'll begin to feel a slight sensation of difference and feel centered back to themselves, and it feels really, really good, and back to myself. At that point, then, I put the white light around me, or I program my day by saying, may God go before me and show me the way. And what that is doing is the word God and the word love are actually the same vibrational frequency in this three-dimensional world. So I'm putting that programming, that loving energy around me. So, like I said, like attracts like. So any energy coming my way has to be on that vibration. If not, it'll be repelled. And that's the best way to answer that. So if people get into that sense of being mindful and taking the time to do that, you'll notice big, big changes. Mm-hmm.
That's an awesome answer.
Can I just say something too really quickly, you guys?
Yes.
The white light, a lot of people talk about white light. White light protects us. Use the white light. And that's true. White light's really, really good. It's really, really good to seal up the space, to seal things up. You bet. If people do paranormal investigations and they cleanse the space, they've brought that, whatever, the soul, the spirit, the earthbound entity into the light, whatever you're going to do. And you need to ground the space and protect the space. And now that once it's clean, or you're clean around you, then you put the white light around you. Because white light seals anything in, and it also prevents it from coming in. So if you put that white light around you, but you haven't cleansed yourself or the space, guess what? You're going to seal in that energy.
Very true.
Interesting, huh?
I want to
I know, Stephanie. Makes sense, doesn't it?
It does make sense. I wish I could put you in my pocket and carry you everywhere.
You can buy my books. I do it. My voice is on the books, too. You can hear them. You download them.
I know that, but for everybody at home, they're amazing.
There's so much to it, though. There's so much to this work, and there's so much to this world, that we're just scratching the surface.
Right.
But just an energetic level, as a lot of people listening know, it's just a whole different world energetically.
It definitely is. I completely agree with you. I want to bring it back a little bit because for everybody at home that knows, I talk about it all the time. I was born with a gift and I didn't know where to turn or what to do with it. And I didn't know I was different. So I want to bring it back to your beginning.
Okay.
How did you realize you had what you had, and who was your biggest influence in your life to teach you the way of...
Oh, wow. Good question. My goodness, Stephanie. Where'd you get these questions from? Oh, let me back you up by saying that you were born with a gift. So what do you say you're a gift? What kind of gift was it?
I was able to do everything as a very small child.
Okay.
Telepathy, telekinesis, psychic, and then mediumship started. I have memories of being in my crib and speaking to spirit.
Yep.
So
Same here. Yep. So this is good, because I think that people should realize that, and you're a great example of it too. That remember that you as a soul, when you're a child, when you're a kid, baby, and the child, you've just come from the spirit world. So you've just come from that realm, and so your mindset, if you will. And it's funny because the last place the soul will go in and out of the body, probably the last quarter of the pregnancy, 7, 8, 9 months. It goes in and out of the body, that body getting used to it. And, of course, 9 months later, I've heard this after birth also, it can, of course, leave the body and come back. And, of course, it comes in and out of the crown chakra, and that's the soft spot. That's why it's always there. But if it's very interesting, because kids, as we know, we're told that kids are very open, kids see things, oh, my gosh, imaginary playmates, that whole thing. We have to think that their mindset is just from spirit. So they're very, very open to seeing things. They're not limiting themselves. They don't know about fear. They haven't been taught judgment yet till probably around 7 or 8. So they're very honest children. So they come in with a lot of psychic, if you will, abilities as yourself. And the same with me. That's exactly what happened with me. I used to see in the crib, so it's funny you mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing, I have this memory so strong that I must have been, I don't know, under 2 years of age, I think. And I was in the crib, And my parents were in the living room. They dumped me in that crib, and I was so angry because I wanted to be with them. That's where all the fun was.
Mm-hmm.
And I just cried and cried, and I remember it. And every time I did that, I remember in the corner of the room there was a man there, standing there, with white hair and blue eyes. And he held up some kind of a toy of some kind, a mobile thing, I think it was. And it would amuse me for hours, and I'd fall asleep. And that happened quite a bit. When I was about 7, 8, 9 years of age, I guess, I was with my grandmother, and she was opening a photo album. And at one point, I saw this photograph, and I said, "Stop, who is that man?" "That's the man who used to visit me in the crib." And she said, "Oh, that's your grandfather. He died before you were born." So that was one of my first experiences. And I remember another experience I had when I was in first grade. My first grade teacher, walked up to her, and I said, I just knew it. I said, "Your son got hit by a car, but it's okay. He just broke his leg." And I was just wanted to tell her because I knew this.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it would help her. And she said, "Get back to your seat." And within several minutes, the principal came in, took her out of the room. And several minutes later, the lady came back in the room with the teacher, and she looked at me and said, "Come here." And I came up to her desk, and she said, "How did you know that?" I said, "What?" And she said, and I was 6, she said, "How did you know my son was hit by a car? He was playing soccer, and the ball went to the street, and went to get it, and a car hit him. But he's okay. He only broke his leg." And I started crying my eyes out because I thought that just because I had that thought, I made it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Which is really true in who we are. We create with our thoughts.
Right.
So I kind of, you know what I'm saying? So it was, and she said to me, no, James, don't worry. You know, whatever language she used for a 6-year-old, she said, God gives people certain abilities, or whatever the word she used for a 6-year-old. You'll help people. I remember she said, you'll help people one day. And that was one of my first experiences. So, yeah, I used to see things all the time. I used to see colors around people. That we know as the aura. I used to know about energy, see energies all the time. And then in my teenage years, it stopped, and I didn't pay attention to it. It wasn't anything special. And then in my early 20s, I went to see a medium from England on a fluke. I didn't believe in it. I didn't believe in any of it. I was raised Catholic, and I'm not necessarily I believe in that Catholic thing too, but I had a sense of there's something different. I'm not sure what it is. And I went to this medium with my friend, and I walked into his apartment. He looked at me and he said, "You're a medium." And I said, "What?" He goes, "You're a medium. The spirit world are going to use you in 2 years' time." And I was like, "Oh, my goodness." I thought this guy was crazy because I just arrived from New York. I was a cynical New Yorker. I moved to California. I thought this guy was, fruit and nuts and crazy and granola and the whole thing. So I thought he was kind of crazy. But to make a long story short, he said things about my family members that had passed over, things that nobody knew about, names, addresses, details. And he got my curiosity going to think about life after death, psychic phenomena. And what I did was I read up a lot of books I could on psychic phenomena just to figure out what this guy was doing. And I remember reading all these books, and there was a common theme throughout. And the theme was about meditation. If you want to center yourself, get to know yourself, understand who you are as a soul, you need to meditate. So I started meditating just to relax myself. I wanted to be a sitcom writer because I'm funny. So I'd meditate about being a sitcom writer and visualize that. I didn't know any better. I didn't really know how to meditate. And it was during those first couple of times I was meditating, afterwards I started seeing lights and colors around people like I did as a child. And then I was working one day at Paramount Studios in their contract department, and I remember there was a girl coworker in her cubicle, and I saw this dead lady behind her. And the lady looked right at me and she said, "You have to tell my granddaughter I'm alive, I'm okay." And she gave details about where she lived, the state of Idaho, described the house she lived in, and so forth and so on. And the girl said to me, "Oh my God, James, that's my grandmother. I used to visit her every summer at her house in Idaho. And she made a promise to me that if she can come through after she passes over, she will do that." And This is exactly what happened.
That's really
so
cool.
I ran out of Paramount. I had to go back in. I ran out, didn't know what to do. I thought I was crazy. I was losing it. Who could understand me? I thought, as you know, Stephanie, probably, you feel alone. You feel like,
Right.
no one will understand me. What's this bad? I'm crazy. And I called up, the only I could call up would understand me was that medium that I went to. And when I spoke to him, his name was Brian Hurst. And I said, "Brian, this very strange thing happened," and so forth. And he said, "James, don't you remember the spirit world predicted you'd be a voice of the spirit world?" I said, "Yes, I do remember that." He said, "James, that was 2 years ago today."
Wow.
So it happened exactly 2 years. So Brian Hurst would be my teacher for several years after that and taught me about City and Development Circle. He formed one and really taught me about metaphysics and mediumship and so forth. And I think he was from England. He had a very good foundation. So that's really my first stories.
And how long was it from the time that you realized that and entered into being the voice of the spirit world before you took it publicly and were actually putting yourself out there as someone who could make these connections for people?
Wow, Tim. Well, let me tell you, it was really I think I was 26 when it happened. It was around there, and I remember, and I was working at Paramount around that time, and I remembered that I would sit with Brian Hurst in this development circle, and I'd work during the day and sit with him at night in development circle. And I remember it was several years, and through that development circle, I began to understand what guides were, and spirit guides and so forth and so on. And I remember one of my guides said to me, if you do the work of the Spirit, if you do our work, we will always take care of you. You will never be of need. And here I am thinking, oh, okay, they want me to work full time. And I started doing readings with friends, messages for friends, people in the development circle, and it was always very accurate. And I thought, well, this is really weird. And I remember feeling when I did the messages that there was such an energy of love. I mean, unconditional love like I've never experienced before in my life. I thought, this is amazing, this loving energy. People that come to a room, they come into the room depressed, upset, in grief, and they would leave, flying. They'd be incredibly lit up and happy and joyful. It's almost like I gave their life back to them, the messages. And I thought to myself, obviously there's no better work to do in the world than to help people in this way. So for my soul, it was definitely a test. I mean, I was tested, as we're tested every day. So I was tested of faith, and I chose to go with Spirit. I quit Paramount. I quit a really well-paying management job with benefits and insurances, the whole thing, not to know what was going to happen. And I started doing 2 readings a day. And I remember it was all word of mouth, and I was booked within months. And then TV heard about me, and believe it or not, it was the Joan Rivers show, the daytime talk show she had in New York. And she called me up and asked me if I wanted to be a guest. And that was my very first show, and she was incredible, and we'd stayed friends for the rest of her life. And that was the beginning. Then Unsolved Mysteries got to see me, and from there I did a show called The Other Side on NBC. It was a daytime show, obviously before its time, but it was a great talk show every day that had paranormal issues. And I was kind of like the resident expert on that show, and it was great. It was really great to see the public. It was really the very first show on daytime that really opened themselves up to paranormal issues. That was back in the early 90s.
And that's something that...
And I'm old. I'm in my 50s, and it's, 2014.
Well, that's something that has been slowly evolving over the years. We see it come in spurts in terms of how the public is willing to perceive and digest, things about the paranormal and things about spirit communication. But you had mentioned earlier how in the UK, you have a lot of psychics and a lot of mediums who have been working for a long time, and that they have a different approach to how they conduct readings than American readers would do. What about the audience? What about the people who are receiving these readings? What's the difference between those who live in the UK and how they're willing to accept this stuff as opposed to the people in the US?
Well, it's all different. So let me tell you this. It's all different, Tim. It's really, and I find it very, very fascinating because in college I was going to major in psychology. Believe it or not, I was going to major in psychology because I found people really interesting. I thought, oh, they're so interesting. Everyone's so different. And learning psychic stuff. I thought, oh, I want to do some psychology. And I actually, of course, now I'm a psychologist. I wear many hats. I'm a, minister, a grief counselor, a psychologist, everything. So it's a very good question. I'm going to tell you this way. Everything is energy, and everything is a mindset, if you will. So there are parts of the U.S., different cities in the U.S., and I've been to most cities here, that there are some cities you'll go to, and they're very, very open. They're very, very aware. They're very open. They're very knowledgeable. And there are some that are very closed that are not really open to it. But every city is so different. For instance, New York is the hardest city to work with because you have cynical, skeptical, fast people. But I'm from New York, so I get it, and I can deal with that energy. But you got to be very aware, very quick. L.A. is a different thing. Everyone's kind of spaced out, but they get it. It's fine. Phoenix a little more. They're open as well spiritually. The Midwest, Chicago, very, very open. Boston is very open. When you get to like Dallas and the South a little bit, there are pockets. Atlanta's open to pockets, but then you also have the religion aspect too, which, and listen, I live in Orange County, California. It's very, very religious here. It's funny. But I think it's different mindsets. And then I think that in England, it's really funny how open Americans are. I have my British mediums come over here, and they say, oh, my God, the American audiences are the best audiences. They're open. They receive it. They're open to the experience. And it's true. They're pretty open to the experience. And we don't have as many mediums as they do, per se, in the UK. Or UK is so small. It's so tiny that the United Kingdom would fit in the state of Texas 12 times. And it's so small. So mediums are tripping on each other over there. So they're more used to mediumship in a way in the UK. But I'll tell you something. Just from coming there just this past summer, when I taught there, the English audiences and the Scottish audiences, and not the Irish, but those two, and even the German audiences, the Swiss, they're very closed. They're very close. They might have incredible mediumship and have incredible detailed evidence, but for some reason they're not good receivers. So whether they're not emotionally available because, they're very stoic and they hold back. So it makes it harder for the medium to make that contact because it's really a three-way conversation. You're having the recipient, the medium, and the spirit. And if the recipient is closed down and not emotionally there, it's very, very hard. It's very tough. Where in America, it's very, very different. So that's really funny because in the skill of mediumship, I think that the UK mediums are very more aware of how to use the mediumship skills, and the United States needs to learn that. But as far as audience go, the U.S. audience is much better. The best in the world, I think, well, some of the best. The Australian audiences are very open, they're very evolved in Australia in all different ways. I think they're a bunch of aliens down there. It's like from a different star system, without a doubt. And, then you go to Brazil and South America, and they're all very, very spiritual. In Brazil, everybody's a medium, so it's really interesting. I've gone there many, many times, and books down there. I took groups down there to John of God and to, years ago before he was known. And I used to see manifestation all the time. I see spirits all the time manifesting physically in a circle, physical manifestations.
Wow.
So they're very open down there. Even people that are very Catholic, but it's more spiritual than religious. So the South Americans are really, and Brazilians would come up to me and say, James, please tell us something. And they were really upset. I said, what is it with you Americans? Why don't they believe this stuff is real? Don't they get it? I said, well, we're kind of a backwards Judeo-Christian kind of society, and we're not sure yet. But, we're all coming along. I think every country evolves consciously as it's meant to, I think.
Well, you mentioned it being a three-way conversation, and that makes me wonder, how much are you dependent on the living person that's in front of you that is receiving this information? How much do you need to have them confirm and to be part of the conversation, or can the spirit continue to communicate with you even if it's something that the living might not be so willing to accept?
Tim, no wonder you're doing this job. Great questions. Really, really great questions. And I'm sure a lot of the people out there would like to know that you're asking the questions they would like to. It's a really interesting process. And it's so, that's why I'm still working and running around the world, the country, doing these demonstrations, because every time I do it, it's new. It's a miracle every time I do it. And when I'm not thinking it's a miracle, then I stop working, So I explain to the audience whenever I go somewhere, and it's funny because a lot of Americans are brand new to this sort of thing, and they used to sing Teresa on television, or John Edward, or myself, and they see it on television, but it's very different in person. So you can have all different types of audiences. You might have somebody who's come to that audience who's completely grieving their dead son. With all they want to contact, they sit there, they're obsessed with him, they're obsessed with, sitting saying, James, come to me, come to me, come to me, come to me. And they think that if they say that loud enough in their head, I'm actually going to go to them. When really what they're doing is just the opposite. They're actually blocking the energy. The energy for the spirit world to work has to be open and clear. So you have to remember, when people come to a big group, people are coming to that group with all different expectations, all different life experiences, all different belief systems. And so for the spirit world, in a way, they have to blend all that energy together, open these people up, and really work through that stuff, if you will, okay? And I try to tell people when I'm doing the work, because I think I'm also a teacher, and I think for me personally, I have to teach those people, because I'm doing this work not only to prove survival evidence, but to teach them spiritually to be more aware of what the process is like, of what energy is like, and so forth. So I'm very aware that the person is very, very closed down, and they might be so obsessed with hearing from their dead son that they might not hear from their mother who's passed over, who needs to get a message through. So it's interesting. So they have to be more open. And people that go there, they're very skeptical. It's all energy. They'll block it. I appreciate skeptics because I was a skeptic. I appreciate that. And I think every certain amount of skepticism is a good thing. I really do. I think it's a good thing. But I think that the skeptic has to be open-minded. So an open-minded skeptic is great. If they're not open-minded and they say this is BS or whatever, then they're a cynic. Then they're cynical. And you can't open up their minds. So that's really, really hard. And they'll never grow, you see. And we're down here to grow. And no matter what you could do, you cannot change their way of thinking. So I think it's really important that the person who comes to see a medium really comes with the mindset that this is an experiment. I hope that my loved one can come through. I'm just going to open up to my mind to the experience. Whatever happens, happens. The medium has got to go to that experience being as open as it can and ready to work to turn over their mind to the spirit world. And the spirit people already know what's going to happen. They already know how they're going to come through or how effective they can be. So the more open we are, the audience and the medium, the more successful the sitting would be.
Well, we are talking with...
That answer the question? I'm not sure.
Sorry. Definitely. We are talking with James Van Praagh. He will be joining us again in the next hour as well. We can take your calls. I just want to let everybody know, though, we're looking for questions. We're not doing readings. But if you have any questions for James, you can give us a call, 508-996-0500. 877-996-1420. You can also visit his website during the news break, vanpraagh.com. It's linked up right on the front page of SpookySouthcoast.com, but it's vanpraagh.com, or you can just go to SpookySouthcoast.com and click on James's photo there, and you'll be able to get right to his website. You can find out about some of the audio courses that you can take. You can find out about the new book, Adventures of the Soul. We'll discuss all that coming up in the next hour, and we'll also talk about how you can come out and see him in Massachusetts coming up on November 3rd, an evening with Spirit with James Van Praagh and Maureen Hancock. It's happening at the Whitman-Hanson Regional High School, which is on Franklin Street in Whitman, Massachusetts, which is only about a half an hour ride, 35, 40 minutes at the most from the south coast of Massachusetts, where we are. There are still some tickets available for the mezzanine and the balcony, but you want to jump on vanpraagh.com right now and get those tickets because they will not last. They will definitely be gone. It will be sold out by November 3rd. So you can go to the website now to purchase those tickets. And we'll talk about that coming up in the next hour too, James, because Maureen has been doing numerous shows around here. She works very closely with our radio station. A lot of people know her, and I think to have a double bill like this is going to be something that folks are really going to want to come out and see. So we'll talk more about that coming up in the next hour. And we'll also talk more about the book, and we'll talk about how people can learn how to tune into their abilities and study with James Van Praagh in that fashion as well. So that's all coming up in the next hour. We also want to let you know, too, that there's going to be a couple of fundraiser events happening for a local no-kill animal shelter that will be built soon. It is called Odie's Place, O-D-I-E-S. Place, and you can go to odiesplace.com or odiesplace.org. Find out about a few events, including a Paint Your Pet Night that is happening tomorrow at the VFW in Dartmouth. It's only $40. They will actually draw out a photo of your pet, and you can paint it yourself. And then coming up on Monday night, there'll be a Bustard Sports Bar in Dartmouth for a Monday Night Football pre-party with former New England Patriot and Super Bowl 36 champion Jermaine Wiggins. And that you can just go and check out what's going on. They're going to be recording a radio show there, and you'll get the chance to meet Wiggy, get an autograph, take a picture of him with a Super Bowl ring, and it all goes to a great cause of building a no-kill animal shelter in the city of New Bedford. So we'll let you know more about that. If you have any questions about it, you can tweet us at SpookySC, and that is where you can follow along with us all through the next hour as well using the hashtag SpookyLive. We'll be back following the news with our guest James Van Praagh for more here on Spooky South Coast, coming up in just a few moments here on WBSM.
For local news, talk, and sports, the South Coast turns to AM 1420 WBSM New Bedford and WBSM.com.